welcome to The Green Pretenders.
A sustainably challenged podcast.
My name is Sian.
And my name is Simon, and in this episode we're going to talk about the environmental impact of this pandemic of COVID-19 that we're currently in.
Not, as some people might believe, out the other end and gathering on Bournemouth Beach.
Exactly. So we're going to talk about pros and cons and maybe some action that we can actually take to sort of get us back on track with the environmental issues that we're currently still facing, because the climate emergency has kind of been knocked off the list a little bit.
Yeah, and we thought it was interesting that at the very beginning of the pandemic, there was a lot that people clung onto as a silver lining. You know, we saw that the reduced travel, use of planes, use of trains, use of cars, obviously had quite a positive impact on air pollution, and that was a real silver lining. We were all grasping onto that. You know, at least the world's getting to breathe whilst human activity slows down. A really good example of that was in China. They had a 25% reduction in carbon emissions and a 50% reduction in nitrogen oxide emissions. And some scientists were saying that equates to the saving of around, 77,000 lives who would normally have been lost to the effects of air pollution. So that was huge. There were some other positives as well, weren't there?
Yes, absolutely. Less energy was used in general, so obviously that is a positive sign, because also we're less dependent on fossil fuels now. What else? People were cycling more and walking more, getting into a routine with that.
Yeah, and in previous episodes, we talked about how we hoped that could become an embedded habit, that people might stay on their bikes even when public transport's back up and running. So that could be a nice hangover, that people's habits have shifted. We also saw water quality really improved in rivers and canals in cities. And actually, even here in London, I went to the canal the other day and it was so much clearer. I could see to the bottom of the canal, which I've never been able to do before. So that's another lovely plus point of everything.
And also, generally, we felt that the trust in science and our reliance on scientists has increased. So we know that we need to listen to those experts because they have actually spent a lot of time researching this, and hopefully that could spill over into the climate emergency, which is also, the call to action is led by scientists.
I wonder if that is an element that's going to be quite polarized, because I do feel like some countries have set an example of being led by the science, letting the scientists be the authority, but I don't know that in this country it feels like anyone has been listening to the scientists, or in America. But definitely in some countries at least, or in some sectors, science has really played a key role, which, will hopefully be something that is taken into account a bit more in the future. But the crux of this episode, unfortunately, is not necessarily these silver linings, because we don't want ourselves to become complacent, thinking that this pandemic has done some good or bought us some time in the climate crisis. Because unfortunately, as much as we all enjoyed those upsides when the pandemic first arose, we're now seeing that actually there's been just as many, if not more, downsides from an environmental perspective.
So if we look at traffic, for example, we already see in China, it's already getting back to normal, and I'm doing quotation marks, that unfortunately means that traffic levels are basically up to what they were before the pandemic. Also, a lot of environmental laws are a bit kind of ignored in order to get the economy up and running again.
And if a politician is trying to decide where to apportion budgets to, it's very unlikely that in the immediate future they're going to really, really prioritise giving lots of money to nice, green, environmentally friendly initiatives and strategies and policies. So it's going to suffer. The green that people care about will be the dollar bill kind, not the climate kind.
Very aptly said. Also, unfortunately, oil has become cheaper during this pandemic, and that means there's more cheap plastic thrown out into the world, And the current awareness of hygiene has also meant that more single-use plastic is being used for like takeaway. We already see like masks washing up on the shores. So yeah, there's a huge plastic problem on the rise, and it was already massive.
Yeah, the litter that we're seeing is just shocking, isn't it? And I feel like people have forgotten how to behave in public because we've all been locked down for such a long time. The instances recently where there have been people gathering in large numbers, like when Liverpool won the Premier League. Is it the Premier League? I should know this. I have a Liverpool fan as my significant other, but they won the football thing, and all of the Liverpool fans went out to celebrate. But the aftermath was like, I've never seen so much litter and rubbish strewn across the floor in my life. And the same as at the beaches. People are just leaving things behind, and it's like, did this always happen, or have people forgotten how to, take their rubbish with them and not leave single-use plastic and litter just all over the place?
And I think more outside gathering, more outside drinking as well in the parks. Like, my council has had to send out emails because the parks in Hackney were in such a bad state. People weren't even taking their rubbish to a bin anymore, let alone recycle anything. So there's definitely an attitude shift, it seems.
And it's also frustrating, I think, because, going to a pub at the moment, so we've got some pubs near us, haven't we, that have started doing a version of a takeaway beer, and you can go sit in a park nearby. But when I went to do that the other day, the only way they'd serve you a beer was in a sealed plastic milk bottle that they give you. They hand it out through this window. And so even if you take your own reusable cup, they won't just fill that up for you because they don't want to sort of contaminate or cross-contaminate anything. So, if you go out for a couple of beers at the moment, that's basically undoing 4 or 5 times that I've bought a shampoo bar instead of a shampoo bottle. And it's like, it's so upsetting because it's just so quickly eradicated, these small efforts that we've been making. It's so quickly cancelled out.
And it's a bit of a slap in the face, isn't it, for people trying really hard. But there's nothing you can do about it, really.
Yeah. So this is all getting a bit doom and gloom, but don't worry, everybody, because after we've run through all of these horrible apocalyptic situations, we will be bringing a little bit of kind of positive action to you. But whilst we're still on the topic of the doom and gloom, something that we kind of feel like overlaps in both the pros and cons column is, what is the reaction going to be to all of this? How much are we going to get back to the climate crisis as a priority? Because it could go either way. Either world-changing catastrophe isn't some remote nightmare concept, it's real, and we've just seen it happen because of a pandemic. So will suddenly that kick into gear the reality of the climate crisis, and people will engage with that much more seriously? Or will it go the opposite way completely, and people are so kind of enveloped in the aftermath of this crisis that the climate feels like a secondary thing? And hopefully we can choose to make it the former, more prevalent, more vital, more immediate than ever. Eco-warrior action.
Exactly. And what are some actions that people could take?
I was thinking the main thing at the moment is going to have to be lobbying and protesting and petitioning, because more than ever, it's going to have to be this kind of structural, company-wide, country-wide change. So yeah, lobbying. Get a letter or email sent to your MP this week, listeners. Just do it. Get an email sent. Tell them that the climate crisis is still one of your main priorities.
Exactly. Make them known that we want a green recovery of the economy out of this pandemic, that we want better lives for everyone after this is over. And as soon as it is, let's get the climate emergency back onto the agenda.
And also a quick tip, if you do email your MP, make sure that you include your postal address and your postcode, because otherwise they won't acknowledge the email. They have to know that you're their constituent in order to acknowledge and respond. But do it. Log on now. Ping off an email. Woo woo.
Also, once we can do that safely again, let's get out on the street. Let's march for the climate. Let's bring it back into the news, back into media outlets that you were using. Tweet, put something on Instagram, get all your followers informed again. Let's share articles. There's a lot of media outlets that are trying to put it back, or to keep the movement going, like Extinction Rebellion as well. They are making people aware that all these things are connected, actually, the pandemic, the climate emergency, and how we get out of this economic emergency as well.
And if you want a bit more info or a bit more sort of encouragement or confidence around any of that, then we did do an episode on activism a couple of episodes back, so you could have a listen to that if you haven't already.
Also, if you've established a habit of walking or cycling, keep that routine going. Ditch the car, maybe ditch the bus, and just get on your 2 feet. It's actually also really good for your health, and now it's summertime, so it's easy. The weather's quite okay, actually, even in rainy Britain.
I always think, like, talking about those things, if you are a new cyclist or a new walker and you're feeling actually really passionate about that, talk to your colleagues about it, talk to your friends who don't already cycle about it, because, there's strength in numbers, and if you can become a real advocate for something like that, then who knows who you could influence to follow suit.
I mean, I think over the centuries, human beings have kind of proven that they can get used to almost anything. So, I think we just need to learn to maybe put ourselves sort of in the background and think about the bigger picture. And it's such small things that we can do that make a difference. And, even if it's uncomfortable, check in with yourself and be like, okay, pros and cons.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. Like, adapting into the environment of lockdown, people actually did do very well on the whole. And I know it's been so hard for people for lots of different reasons, but on the whole, people have adapted so well, and it's so impressive. And when we choose not to adapt, that's a whole different thing. It's stubbornness.
It is, and it's our ego getting in the way. And we should definitely always keep that ego in check.
Definitely. And I think the last thing that we would say or ask of our listeners is, if you have any sort of position of influence or power at work, or if you have a voice and a platform, then use that influence to bring the climate crisis back to the fore at the first available opportunity. Or if you're an entrepreneur and you're starting something afresh, then you can carve green practice into the very heart of what you're doing and be the change, the post-pandemic change.
Exactly. Be the post-pandemic change that you want to see happening.
So in summary, we know that there have been some silver linings. We've had clearer air, clearer water. Science has kind of played a really important role. But we also know that a lot of things have really suffered from an environmental perspective due to this pandemic. And what we know most of all is that there's no such thing as a point where we have to give up. We can do what we can, and we must do what we can.
Yes, absolutely. And because we're still in this weird situation, we're only going to present Eco Whoops to end on a high note. What is yours, Sean?
It's kind of like an eco poop rolled into an eco whoop. So the root of it is a poop, but we come out with a whoop. So let me expand on that very confusing setup that I've just given you. Essentially, in the last couple of weeks, I put an Instagram post on our lovely Green Pretenders Instagram, at Green Pretenders. Give us a follow, give us a like. I put an Instagram post up of something that I got in the post from WWF, because last year my lovely auntie adopted a penguin for me through WWF. And in their recent mail out, there was some information about noise pollution in the oceans. So I posted that from WWF on our Instagram. And my wonderful friends, Jess and Simon, they alerted me to the fact that WWF have a pretty shady history and present. Essentially, they fund guards in indigenous communities in an effort to prevent poaching. But what actually happens is that villagers and innocent people have been killed and tortured by these forest rangers, and that's funded by WWF. And they kind of have been challenged on it, but they basically try and write it off. That's a very kind of broad and simple summary, but you can Google it. BuzzFeed did a big expose on it. So yeah, like that all blew my mind, and I just couldn't believe that such a prominent, universally known charity has such shady goings on. So obviously that sounds like a big eco poop, but I'm turning it into an eco whoop, because the whoop is education and reading and sharing knowledge, because I'm so grateful to have that flagged, and it opened up, a lot of reading for me and finding out things, and then I can be informed to make better choices in terms of who I advocate or who I talk about or who I donate to. So yeah, the eco whoop, to make a long story short, is education and learning.
Love it. Absolutely. Get informed, and stay on top of things.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So my true eco whoop is barbecue coal. So we know it's barbecue season. A lot of people are barbecuing in their gardens, which is lovely. But we want to make sure that charcoal does not have tropical wood in it, that it's not unsustainably sourced. So get informed. And this one actually comes from my lovely sister, who is a listener of the podcast and loves it. And she made me aware that there is a company in, unfortunately, Germany and Austria, which is called Meister, Maister, and they produce charcoal for barbecuing out of corn. Mais is the word for corn in German. And obviously this is for the German-speaking part of the world, but I did some research, and also in Britain there are companies that produce sustainably sourced charcoal. So have a little Google, check them out, read up on it, check also at your supermarket and see if there is sustainable charcoal, because we don't want any tropical wood end up on our barbecues.
Heck yeah.
My second eco whoop, well, let's see if it turns out to be an actual eco whoop, but I read that there's a new political party on the rise called Beyond Politics, and they have sort of emerged out of the Extinction Rebellion movement. Now, Extinction Rebellion is very decentralized. Anyone can sort of fly their flag if they stand by their principles. We have talked about this as well in our climate activism episode, so give that a listen. But Beyond Politics will hold an event in central London on the 25th of July. The front woman is Valerie Brown, so we'll see what they stand for. It's quite interesting that, Extinction Rebellion is kind of going from movement to now there's an emerging political party. But it could potentially be a real eco whoop, because, bringing environmental issues to the forefront into the political scene, mixing it up a bit, and hopefully they will stand by everything that Extinction Rebellion stands by. And they have been very vocal at the moment. We'll watch them with a critical eye, as always, if something is political. But, let's check them out, see what they stand for.
So what's the event in July?
So I think that is a rally in central London, 25th of July.
Cool. That would be interesting, definitely. I wonder how they'll compare to the Green Party as well.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, lots of food for thought. One last question. On your non-tropical barbecue coal, what is your favourite thing to barbecue, Simon?
I think my favourite barbecue thing are definitely courgettes, and I also love a barbecued mushroom. Portobello mushroom.
Oh, yes.
Love that texture.
Get some halloumi on a skewer. Oh, mama. Wonderful. Well, the only thing left to say is give us a follow on social media. Where can they find us?
At Green Pretenders on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. Or email us.
thegreenpretenders@gmail.com. And if you are listening on iTunes, please give us a like and subscribe. We hear that it's important for podcasters to say this. So there you go, we've said it.
Exactly. And if you have a bit more time, leave us a review. That would be lovely. Also comment on YouTube.
And lastly, remember, the pod is always greener.
Green Pretender.